community for granted anymore. They performed for her last night. They did not perform for Kamala Harris last time. And Democrats better make sure that they deliver for that community in a real and meaningful way to keep that community in the tent. That's just one example of a community.
An overinterpretation would be, you know, Democrats have Latinos back.
We don't have Latinos.
Right, but that's the concern. You could read this, and let me just show what people you mean. Passaic County, which has got the largest population of Hispanics in the state. Passaic County, Mikey Sherrill won 57-42, so a 15-point spread in Passaic County. You're like, oh, you know, it's largely Hispanic. This is New Jersey. You would think that this would always be the case. Donald Trump won this county by about 3 points just last year. So Mike Duhame, again, overinterpret these results.
I grew up in Passaic County, so I know that area very well. I think the overinterpretation is Democrats looking at this and saying, oh, we're going to sweep everything next year. We're going to get back the U.S. Senate. We're going to win back all these governor's races. I think in reality, what you learned last night was where Donald Trump is strong is unique to him. He has some downside, certainly, and we saw that last night. But I think the overinterpretation would be, hey, we're going to sail forward, whether we have a socialist in New York or more centrist candidates in New Jersey and Virginia. I think you really have to look state by state and district by district.
So what's the underinterpretation, though? Because maybe the White House is waking up and saying, this isn't our problem. We just had weak candidates in this state.
Yeah, the underinterpretation is when you lose by double digits in both these states, it certainly says something. When Republicans have won New Jersey in the past and Virginia, 2009 presaged a big year for Republicans in 2010, 1993 presaged 1994, Republicans taking back the House. I mean, you cannot sugarcoat this. This was a blowout. And it wasn't just New Jersey and Virginia. Local races in Connecticut, statewide races in Georgia, county races in Pennsylvania. This was an epic blowout. This was a bloodbath for the Republican
Party.
Pretty
much 100% across the board, or hundo P, as my 18-year-old boys would say. This was like a hundo P night for Democrats. So all the Sherrill people and people close to the Sherrill campaign last night, I kept on asking them, what's the lesson for Democrats going forward? And what they said is, look at the combination that we ran on. Yes, we ran against Donald Trump and we held him up because he's deeply unpopular in this state, but we kept on tying him to the economy and affordability. And when you do both, that puts Democrats in a better position.
You know, look, they're probably going to take exception to this, but there's not much difference between the campaign, not the quality of the campaign, but the messaging that Zohran Mamdani ran here in New York, Mikey Sherrill ran in New Jersey, Abigail Spanberger ran in Virginia. All of it was tied to the issue of affordability. All of that was pointing out that Donald Trump made a whole lot of promises that got him elected last year that he's not kept. And I think what you saw was anger from the voters and saying, listen, Mr. President, we gave you a chance. You said you were going to lower prices. You said you were going to make our lives better. And the reality is we're struggling more than ever. And so that's the kind of message that I think you see both from somebody like Zohran Mamdani and Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill, who probably don't think they have much in common with each other. At least the two governors don't think they have much in common with the mayor of New York. But the reality is very much laser focused, as Mike pointed out, on the economy, on an affordability message. If I were the Republicans today, I would take very, very, very strong heed of that. And I would say we need to deliver quickly, because if we don't deliver, we control everything. And that's not going to bode well for us next year.
I think Democrats nominated a centrist in New Jersey who ran on a bio that stuck her squarely in the center of the electorate. She did not fall into the trap of going too far to the left on these progressive issues. And when you basically can stay in the center or center left as a Democrat in a blue state, you're going to win. If you get caricatured as a far left Democrat, you can lose even a blue state. But I think the Sherrill campaign did a very good job of keeping her centered, not going too far to the left, and letting Donald Trump essentially motivate both sides. But in New Jersey, there's a lot more Democrats than Republicans.
10 seconds each. We're a year minus 1 day for the midterms. If you're a Republican this morning, how nervous are you?
I look at it and say, hey, get prepared to lose the House unless some crazy redistricting. We probably keep the Senate because of the map, but you should be worried.
Flip it over. How excited should Democrats be?
Democrats should be excited. Democrats now, especially if you're somebody like a Mikey Sherrill, Abigail Spanberger, certainly if you're Zohran Mamdani, you need to deliver quickly. I mean, people put their faith in you that you're going to make their quality of life better. You're going to make the economy better for them. You're going to make life affordable. You need to deliver quickly. And Democrats need to think about how that message communicates next year in House races. They need to paint Republicans as the people who are causing the pain, which they can because they control everything.
Julie Rosensky, Mike Duhame, I've been in New Jersey for 2 days. I've heard a lifetime's worth of Bruce Springsteen. I need a break. Thank you very much for that.
I'm going to bring in now Ken Martin, chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Audie. Thanks for having me. It's a great day to be a Democrat.
Well, the pressure is on, though, for you in particular, because all of us can talk and interpret, but you actually have to put money behind your interpretations. So when you look at the moderates who won, and then you look at this big win in New York City for a Democratic socialist, how do you bridge that gap?
Well, look, I mean, last night was really interesting, of course, and what it proved is what I've said all along in my time leading in Minnesota and now at the DNC, that we are a big tent coalition. There's no one way to be a Democrat, right? We win through addition, not subtraction. We win by bringing in new voices with new ideas, right? But as much as people want to focus on the differences within the Democratic Party, of course, we have conservative Democrats, centrists, progressives, and leftists. The reality is there was a lot that all of these candidates had in common last night, right? There was a through line, and the through line is that all three candidates, Zoran Mamdani, Abigail Spanberger, and Mikey Sherrill, were focused on kitchen table issues, not on gilded ballrooms. They were focused on affordability. How do you actually bring down the cost of goods? How do you actually bring down the cost of people's mortgage and rent and the cost of childcare and on, all the things that are creating anxiety within the American people who are just want a champion, want someone to focus on their economic future. And that's what Democrats did. I also think the wrong lesson last night, I know there was anti-Trump sentiment in this country, but it really takes away from the fact that the other thing all three of those candidates had in common is they ran for something. They ran on a positive agenda of how they would actually make a difference in people's lives. And so,
Ken Martin,
look,
I want to jump in here because also you have people, maybe it's David Hogg, maybe it's Stacey Abrams. There are going to be people out there who are going to put their chips on certain kinds of candidates. And are you, as AOC said at the top of this show, denying the future by not embracing some of these candidates farther left?
The idea of the DNC not embracing candidates in the Democratic Party is just inaccurate. As I just mentioned, the way I led in Minnesota is through a big tent approach. There's no one way or one stripe of being a Democrat, right? We are a coalition party, and that means you win through addition, not subtraction. That means we welcome all candidates that run. It's not up to me to put my finger on the scale and decide which candidates we will support. That's up to the primary voters, which is why, by the way, I endorsed Zoran Mamdani the night that he won and was proud to support him. Unlike other Democratic leaders, I will tell you this, we are actually building a big tent. We understand that in this country, we need different types of Democrats to win in different spaces. And all of them bring different ideas. But no one should confuse unanimity with unity in this party. And what do I mean by that? Of course, we're in this big tent coalition. We're going to have a difference of ideas and opinions on how to accomplish things. But what we share in terms of unity is that we all have the same goals. Our goals are to lower healthcare costs and to make sure people have access to healthcare. Our goals are to make sure.
I want to jump in here just because I want to have time to ask you about Prop 50 in California. I just want to play for you a little bit what Governor Newsom had to say in explaining that victory.
Prop 50 is not about drawing lines on a map. It is about holding the line to what makes us who we are. Donald Trump is nothing more than weakness masquerading as strength. Why else do you need to make a phone call to Greg Abbott in the middle of the midterm redistricting unless you're weak?
This turned out to be quite a boon for California Democrats. They were able to raise a ton of money off of this issue. And then you had Newsom coming out, kind of giving us 2028 vibes in his speech. So I want to know from you, do you think blue states, so to speak, need to get in on this, get into this conversation about redistricting? Are we looking at an escalating redistricting war?
Well, certainly, as we've said, what happened in California was the counterpunch to Texas and Greg Abbott bending the knee to Donald Trump. And so now we've leveled the playing field, and now it's up to Republicans. If they continue with this nonsense and continue going down this road of trying to redistrict, unconstitutionally redistrict in Republican-controlled states, we're going to meet them state by state. They wanted this fight. They created this fight, right? And we're going to meet them. This is not your grandfather's Democratic Party where we're going to play with one hand behind our back. We are actually fighting back. I'm proud of Governor Newsom and Californians for sending a message. My hope now is that it creates a chilling effect for the Republicans, and they realize that we're going to meet them each and every step of the way, whether it's in Virginia, whether it's in New York, whether it's in Illinois, whether it's in other states throughout the country. We will meet them with fire. And I'm just, we're not playing around anymore on this. And I'm glad that Governor Newsom stood up and said what he is, because Donald Trump is a weak man. And the fact is, he knows he's going to lose. Last night is a clear example of that. And the only way they can win in 2026 is rigging the maps and changing the rules midstream. And we're not going to allow them to do that.
Donald Trump's so-called messaging on affordability does not include increasing workers' incomes to help them afford what they need to buy. Today, while speaking to an audience of McDonald's franchise owners, which includes some of the richest franchise owners in the world, Donald Trump told them they're going to have to fight the minimum wage.
The minimum wage thing you'll have to be talking about. You're going to have to fight. We were talking about California, Gavin Newsom from California. And I knew he's laying siege on the minimum wage. And you people probably know, because that's a very complex subject, and you people probably know better than anybody the impact one way or the other, good or bad. And you're going to let your local congressmen, your senators know about it.
Joining us now for her first MS Now interview since winning the Virginia's governor election is Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger of Virginia. She's a former Democratic congresswoman and CIA officer. Governor-elect, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It is really great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So Virginia is one of those states that has a higher minimum wage than the federal minimum wage, significantly higher. Which Donald Trump seems to think is a very bad idea, telling people running McDonald's franchises, you're going to have to fight the minimum wage.
I mean, what we continue to hear from this president is just out of step with what, frankly, I heard on the ground over the past nearly 2 years of my campaign for governor. People are struggling. People are really having a hard time making ends meet, whether it's costs at the grocery store, the pharmacy counter, when they get their energy bill, when they sign their kids up for daycare, if they can find a spot. And housing prices continue to go up, whether you're a renter or a buyer. And the reality is that life just continues to be difficult. And to hear this president kind of so flippantly talk about something such as the minimum wage, not addressing real issues within the housing market, real issues within, across communities where we see energy prices going up, real issues that affect people. And chiefly, we will see increased healthcare costs continue to go up, in part because of the so-called one big beautiful bill. So he is wreaking havoc on our economy and on people, and ultimately not in any way being responsive. And I think we saw that in the results of the Virginia election. People want a governor who is going to be responsive to the challenges that they are facing on the ground and in their day-to-day lives.
If a Democrat wins a state like Virginia by 5 points, other Democrats want to know, how did you do it? What do we need to know? What do we need to know nationally? To win by 15, you must have something that national Democrats need to know about.
Well, I will say it's the largest Democratic margin of victory in Virginia since the Kennedy administration. And the way that we did it, frankly, not just winning our 3 statewide seats, but also flipping 13 seats in the House of Delegates, where we had tremendous candidates who want to represent their communities. For me, it was all about traveling all across our state, listening to people, which sounds, such a simple thing, but the reality is that far too often people will get prescriptive about what it is that we need to do policy-wise. But if you are on the ground, if you are listening, if you are mobilizing people around the concerns that they have for themselves, for their kids, for their community, for their local economy, people want a government that is responsive, and certainly whether it's issues of lowering costs, issues of strengthening our schools, or overall safety and security within our communities, people were really responsive to the campaigning that I did in every corner of our Commonwealth, focused on really straightforward policies that are going to make an impact on the things that are, front of mind for them. The last things you think about before you lay your head down at night, and the first things you think about in the morning.
When you talk about every corner of the Commonwealth, I think of the corner that goes way down into Tennessee, shares the border with Tennessee, Tazewell, towns like that down there. And I looked at those voting returns, and you perform better in those places, which are very, very strongly Republican places, than any Democrat I've seen running in that kind of region. So you have found a way to talk to Trump voters and earn their vote. Is there something that was specifically targeted at Trump voters in what you were presenting?
I think, and you're talking about the corner of Virginia that is known as the place where Virginia begins. And you know, if you look at a map, it's actually west of Detroit. Virginia is a large state. And in going to communities that don't typically vote for Democrats, that is admittedly the case, I think what was important for me was to demonstrate interest and true desire to get to know people, to be present, to demonstrate respect. Because, you know, in every part of Virginia, whether they're historically Republican voting or Democratic voting, or they're toss-up communities, whether they're, you know, down the street from my home or they're hours and hours away, people want to feel rooted, and people want to feel that their concerns matter and that their voices matter, that their communities matter. You know, and I moved back home to Virginia 11 years ago to be closer to family. And for me, I grew up in the suburbs of Richmond. I was able to move back home. My husband was able to, you know, have his job remote. It worked for us. But in so many parts of Virginia, that's just not an option. And so to even be able to speak to what it is to, you know, have that feeling of being rooted in a community that you love, a place where you want to raise your kids, that's not a possibility for so many people who are getting either priced out of the communities they grew up in, or where there's not enough economic opportunity for their kids to come back to. Then you add on to that the challenges of childcare deserts, and you add on to that, you know, changing economic frictions, the attack on the federal workforce we're seeing coming out of Washington, the fact that no fewer than 6 rural hospitals across Virginia will close. You know, these are serious challenges that you know, I intend to address and certainly heard about during my time on the campaign trail.
Abigail Spanberger, Governor-elect of Virginia, thank you very much for joining us here tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.